Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. Tonight we've got James Sanderson and he's presenting 13 simple hacks on how to become a better scuba instructor. So James has been a diver since 2000 and an instructor since 2002. He's currently a GUE instructor. He also works as the UK dive sales manager for Aqualung based up here in Lancashire. So I'll hand off to James for his presentation. Here we go.
All right, James. Thanks a lot. Good evening, everyone. I hope lockdown finds everyone safe and well. Let me just get my screen share up and we should be good. All right, so hopefully you've all got a screen share there. What I'm going to try and cover off and talk to you about this evening, I guess I wanted to imagine the conversation I would have over a drink with a new dive master or instructor, or maybe someone who's thinking about becoming a dive master or instructor. And the sorts of things that I found made my life easier that weren't necessarily taught in the IDCs or instructor training programs. So it's kind of a little bit lighthearted. It's hopefully some fun, all things based on my experience. What I would say is the things I'm going to give you are not absolutes, and they're not definites, and they're certainly not rules. And you might find that some of them you do already. You might find that some of them, or even perhaps one of them, is just a new idea to you, or a fresh perspective to you on something. But these are just all things that I found made my life easier. If you're not currently a dive master or instructor, it may well be that some of these things, they're really good yardsticks. They're things to look for, I think, in an instructor who is teaching you a class. So it's a great way, I think, of are they doing any of these things? Because I think any instructor worth their while should be doing some of these tips and some of these hacks in their classes to make them really slick and really, really professional. If you've got some questions along the way, I think Dan is going to curate the questions, and what we'll do then, we'll kind of pick them all up and have a go at them at the end. But I'd really encourage you to make notes. I would be very surprised if there's not one thing in here which you could take away an action. I'd be very, very surprised. I'd be amazed. So who the hell am I? Well, hopefully I'm able to bring a little bit of my own experience to you. I've been certified as a diver since 2000. Took the same route that almost everybody does, which is you go from zero to hero fairly quickly. I qualified as a PADI instructor in Florida in 2002. And then I worked full-time in a couple of different resorts, pretty much through to 2008. That included Grand Cayman, a long stint, several years actually, in the British Virgin Islands, and then also Utila. During that period, I trained up as a staff instructor. So that was where I got involved in instructor development. And then I actually worked full-time as an IDC staff instructor for the late Andy Phillips in Utila for a year. That was a lot of fun. I transitioned out of teaching PADI through to teaching for GUE, and that was really just based on my own diving and a shift in my own diving style, and I just felt I was better able to reflect that with a different toolkit. And I'm qualified full open circuit cave trimix, and I'm a newbie CCR diver, so we'll see how we get on with that. And as Dan said, I've got a day job at the moment as sales manager for the UK for Aqualung. So I'm actually taking a break from teaching at the moment, and that's just to spend some more time getting involved in some project diving, and I'm devoting everything at the moment to diving the CCR and building my time on that. So that's who the hell I am. This is a question. You can actually ping your answers to Dan. This is a great quote, and I'd like to see whether anyone can guess who said this. And what they said is, did you take their money? You took their money to teach them, not decide if they were qualified or not qualified. That's what's wrong with this goddamn sport.
Me.
Who on earth do you think would have been ballsy enough to say something like that?
Kevin says you, James.
Yeah, that's not a bad answer. Any good ones, Dan?
No one else has come back to us on that.
Okay.
I'll tell you what my guess was.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what you said.
So I thought it was one of the founders of Paddy.
Yeah, it's correct. It was actually a quote from John Cronin in 1994. So what I'm trying to establish with this is not about agency. This is about attitude, and that's really what I'm trying to establish with this. Is that the thought and the principles of offering just the best quality class you can have really nothing to do with agency and everything to do with the individual and the attitude, and that's really how I wanted to kind of frame this. So where do we end up? Okay, so this is the first one. Grab your pen and paper. Let's just see how we get on. So this is the first thing I would do. This is going to sound obvious. Keep your objectives simple. Trying to establish simple goals at every dive. If you end up with a complicated plan, if you end up trying to establish or achieve multiple parameters in a single dive, you're just going to end up in a mess, really in a mess. Keep it really easy. Keep it really down to one thing you are trying to achieve with that dive, and then maybe just keep it down to one or two things you're trying to achieve with that student. With a complex dive, you are much less likely to achieve any of the things on there. So keep the parameters simple. What are you trying to do? Is it just establish trim? Is it just to establish some propulsion? Is it just to establish taking an SMB out of a pocket? Just something simple, because it's then very easy for the student to also understand what is expected of them on that dive. So keep it really simple, like you would do with any complex dive you were planning. A plan which you can't write down in 2 or 3 lines is really no good at all. Try and be clear about who's going to do what and where and when. Remember as well that students have got a lot of information coming at them during a class. So just be really clear and simple. I want you there. I want you here. After 15 minutes, we're going to do this. Keep it very clear and very specific. Don't overcomplicate it. If you have a plan that you have to reel off a complex slate, and I'll come back to this point as well, if you can't remember it, how the hell can anyone else? All right? If you have to parrot it off, it's already too complex. Don't forget as well, not just about the information and the direction you want to give to your students, but think about who else is in the water with you if you're a dive professional. Don't forget you're going to have maybe a video diver, a safety diver, maybe a certified assistant or an assistant in training, and be really clear with them where you want them positioned. And don't forget to watch and observe them as well. Keep it simple. Complex plan is much more likely to fail, and you're much less likely to get any of it done at all. So keep objectives simple. My second tip for you: briefings are called briefings for a reason. They're brief. Don't start reteaching and going back into the ins and outs of everything you're trying to achieve when people are either kitted up or pitching about on the boat. If a brief was meant to be long, it wouldn't be called a brief. It's really easy. Keep it simple. Don't start doing, as I said here, a lot of information heavy lifting right before the dive. You should just have the dive simply annotated. Whether that dive is training or fun or something else, keep it simply annotated, and it's a simple, quick bullet point review before you hit the water. But don't start going back into information, because you'll unpick it, you'll change things, you'll lose where you were, and you'll burn time you don't have. So keep briefs brief. This is something which I found incredibly useful, which is use a whiteboard, and use a whiteboard habitually, and use it all the time. You know, we use whiteboards for so many other things. You know, I've just picked some samples here. It might be writing down a workout at the gym. It might be planning out a sports play. Lanny, who you had present to you the other week, drawing a simple cave dive. So if we do all these other things in really simple schematic form and annotated form, why do we then, when we're starting talking about skills that a student has to achieve in the water, do we then stand there and rattle off 5, 10, 15 or 20 separate things? And we're expecting them to remember that. I just find it just baffling. Take a whiteboard out and just write down very, very simply what they're going to be doing on each on that dive. Write down, number 1, we will enter the water. Number 2, pre-dive check at the surface. Break it down. What you can do at that point as well, you can also, you know, if you've got some markers, give the student a marker and get them to write down the next thing that's going to happen. You could break it down in terms of the specific functions of a skill. If it's a complex motor skill, like a gas share or a valve manipulation in a higher level class. But students are task loaded, you know, they've got a lot on their mind, they're probably just worried enough about going diving, and you're expecting them to memorize a list of tasks. It just doesn't work. Keep a whiteboard, go and spend some money, 10, 15 quid on a whiteboard, a packet of pens, and just write down what you're going to do on that dive. Write down a clear objective. Something which I started to find very useful as well, at the bottom of the whiteboard, say for example, I was conducting some skills on the training platform, I would draw a square that was the training platform. And most whiteboards come with a couple of magnetic markers. So you could say to the student, this yellow marker is me. This is where I will be. These markers are you. This is where you will be. And you can actually start then to draw maybe a direction of swim, or indicate which direction you want them looking. Anything you can do to make that information do another lap of their brain. I've only seen whiteboards used when in higher level classes. I cannot think of a single occasion when I've seen a entry-level dive class being taught with an instructor just writing out very, very simply what the objectives are for each dive, or even what the running order of that dive is going to be. It's so powerful and so easy. I just go and buy a whiteboard tomorrow and use it habitually. Okay, we've got two quite good ones here. Like, know when to start teaching. And I suppose this goes back to that quote, doesn't it, that I started off with, is, you know, don't be a passive observer. That student has given you, or they've given the dive centre money to learn something. So if you just sat there floating, looking great, thinking, you know, how fantastic your trim is, and there is chaos just unfolding in front of you, you are not performing as an instructor. Don't be a passive observer. Find opportunities to actively teach. Get involved. You know, how many of you who are already instructors have been teaching a student, but also then given feedback or correction to one of your certified assistants as well? The question is, if you haven't, why not? If you've noticed something in their technique or position that you can correct and feedback on, actively teach with, you should do that. You should be doing that at all times. If you're on the ascent and you notice that, that maybe there's an easy way for a student to reach a dump valve, or that you're seeing a lot of gas coming out of the dry suit, anything you can observe and correct, actively interject and get involved. But heed the next point, because this is the balance. Know when to stop doing it as well, okay? So if you are hands all over a student, you're just going to freak them out, and you're just never going to get anything done, and you'll end up task fixated. All they'll see is your hands in front of them, and they'll get stressed, and the learning will stop. Like sometimes it also involves just like, shutting up. Instructors are great at just crapping on all the time, and they just then stop. So sometimes you just need to tell them exactly what they need to know. This is a really good exercise as well. Maybe something, an entry-level course is a good place to start this. Just look at, look at the modules of that class, Dive 1, Session 1, or maybe Academic Session 1, and just write down what are the 1 or 2 things that they are there to learn in that session. What are just the 1 or 2 things they need to know? And then just think about what are the important things, and only the important things that they need to know about that. So break things down into what is it, what do they need to know? Then what is the only thing that if you only told those things are? Then have a think about the other stuff, which is a bit more interesting, and it could be used, the nice to know things. These are things which add a little bit of colour to what we're teaching, but it's not important. They're not necessarily important things. They just add a bit of colour and a bit of background. And then you've got the other stuff, which is the cool to know stuff. And this is the stuff that you'll just get bogged down in. It will burn time, and it will cloud the important information. And know when to say to the student, hey, look, that's a great question, and that's a really good point. But I tell you what, let's talk about it when we have hot chocolate after the dive or something, and make a point of going back and revisiting that. So just keep the information pared down to what they need to know, and don't be afraid just to stop and say, right, okay, I think we're done here. I think we're done for today. That might be that you've taught them all that you can do effectively for that day, or maybe that everyone's tired or hungry, and just know when to stop. Know when to stop teaching, but know when to start teaching as well. And it really is, you have to find where you are between those 2 points. Use video, but use it effectively. If you're just going in the water and just shooting like an amazing video of their dive, that's not really very useful. I always used to jokingly say that my video was like it's like the eye of Sauron. It would if you call attention to it, it will see you. Go and spend some money. Go and spend 30 or 40 pounds. Go and invest it in a small action cam, something with plenty of battery, a standby mode, and attach a bolt snap to it. And I would just wear my GoPro attached to my right shoulder D-ring in standby mode, and that would mean that I could at any point I could just pull that camera out. I could grab 2 or 3 seconds of video and put it away again. You need to be able to deploy and capture video live and in progress of teaching, but not at the detriment of what you're doing. Use it so that it is there for you to be able to see, for them to be able to see, what you are seeing. Don't underestimate how valuable it is, but also don't underestimate how damaging it can be as well. It's not there. It's not a tool for ridicule. It's not a tool for personal attacks on a diver. It's actually just about maybe helping them see. It's helping their brains sometimes just understand what their feet are doing. That's basically it. You learn to shoot it yourself as well. Don't rely on a video diver. If you've just got 2 or 3 students in the water, you should be able to teach, manage feedback, and grab moments of video here and there as well. Something which is quite good is if you're working with the video, give yourself little prompts and leads in it as well. Don't be afraid to put your own hand into the camera shot and maybe point at something. Typically that's a head position or a foot position. Maybe point at something to give you a prompt for the debrief later. Maybe give yourself an okay to say, look, actually, this is something which is really good, because those things are also equally valuable to capture and point out, and start to build that narrative. Don't just leave the camera running, because what you'll end up with is 45 minutes of video, which you've then got to go through. You're much better shooting in 5 and 10 second blocks, because then it makes, just post dive, you can flick through those very, very quickly and easily. You should be able you should already know which video you're going to show. There's nothing worse than getting to a clip and you're watching it and you cannot remember why you shot that. So give yourself visual prompts, shoot in short bursts, and sometimes a still work effectively as well. But whatever you do, don't sit down after a dive and then re-watch the whole goddamn dive again. They've just done the dive. They don't need to watch the whole thing in real time again. Pick out the salient points. It's a debrief tool. It's there just to pull out small chunks of actionable information. Don't skip on your pre-dive checks. As instructors, we're very good at making sure that our students are checking and doing whatever pre-dive sequence that you use, and then we essentially just dial ourselves out of that, or we do some sort of self-check. But what we want to be doing is showing like a leadership position with pre-dive checks. And this is crucial. Integrate yourself into the team's pre-dive checks. Now, it may well be that you don't lead the pre-dive check. It may well be that you hand that over to the students as they become more confident with that, but still integrate yourself into the team for those checks, because this will happen. They may well pick up something you missed. I've had an incident and I hadn't pulled the zip tie tight enough, and my reg, after I checked it, the movement of me checking it, the reg actually came out of the mouthpiece. So I would have dived with just the mouthpiece on the bungee with the reg down to one side. And one of the students pointed it out straight away and picked it up. That was a big plus for them. They felt really good that they'd done something good. And frankly, they'd saved me a lungful of water later on a dive, because I thought I checked it and then it come out. So integrate yourself and show leadership with pre-dive checks. Don't show that there's something that you teach but don't do. This is another hack that I kind of learned the hard way, particularly when I was starting to use video. What I would do is see a problem, catch it beautifully on video, come up with a solution for it, and then give them that solution in the post-dive debrief. Well, as soon as you start thinking about it, you think, well, is there a way that I can give them that debrief information? Can I fix that problem on the dive? It's much more efficient. Yeah, some things are just going to require a verbal discussion or analysis of a video. But if you have a problem you can fix in the water, if there's a solution you can find, do it there and then. Don't wait until the next dive to do it. I always imagine it's much like having a fault or a problem on a dive. Is you don't want to carry the faults and problems through and forward with you into new sections of that dive. Try and fix stuff there and then. It may just be that you have to show them to move their head back, or even just make something of an adjustment to their equipment in the water. But that's where they're going to do their learning, is while they're wet and while they're underwater. If you can fix it there, if you can debrief it and give them a solution to it, do so. Only carry it over if it's a problem which really cannot be fixed. Worst comes to worst, you can just come up to the surface and discuss something and make a move or a change, and try it again then. But don't keep on bringing more things over onto the next dive session that you could have fixed, very easily beforehand. We're now firmly in the realm of pet peeves, like stop the amateur dramatics with demonstrations. It just drives me absolutely berserk. So a little bit of psychology is humans are over imitators, and that is, we don't know when to stop copying. Our brains are just poorly adjusted. We copy everything. So I see people doing these kind of wonderfully kind of theatrical hand movements. They're showing bubbles escaping, and they're pointing at something and shaking their finger backwards and forwards, and there is so much active communication happening at that point. The actual skill itself is just lost in this amateur dramatic performance of a skill. Just keep it really simple. Simply indicate you're going to do something, and then just do it in a slow and realistic way. That's all you need to do. If you start showing them things that you don't want them to do, you end up with something of a problem, because the student's probably a little bit task loaded, they've got a little bit of CO2 going, they may just misunderstand you, and odds on they're just going to start imitating the wrong things. And what you don't want them doing is imitating the wrong elements of the skill. So let's keep it simple, just really simple, really slow, and really clear. Just do aside with the amateur dramatic performance of skills, and the conducting of the orchestra underwater. It's just a pointless waste of time. If you have the ability to do the whatever fitness requirement is part of the class, just do it. Don't just sit there and bark orders or tell them to swim faster. Whether that's a tread water, whether it's a timed swim. There's lots of reasons to do it. Really, for me, the two best reasons to do a fitness test with the student, if the class requires it, have nothing to do with fitness, really. For me, it's a really great icebreaker. It's a great way to, maybe on the end of the first day of a class, or whatever it may be, just have a bit of downtime with them. It's maybe only going to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but have a swim. You'll feel better for it. It's a great chance to have a discussion with them, get to know them. People just spend a couple of minutes doing that. It's a really brilliant icebreaker. You'd be so surprised. And it will make sure your fitness is where it needs to be. I would say, unless you have someone, particularly with swim tests, I've had it before with students who have had semi-professional swimming backgrounds. Yeah, they're going to do a swim test in just a few minutes flat. There's no point in trying to compete there. But you should really be finishing, either as quickly or faster than your fastest student, unless they are, athletic. I hate swimming, I absolutely detest swimming, but I make myself do it, and I'm rarely beaten by a student in a swim test. Make sure your fitness is where it needs to be, and if that means getting out and going to learn to swim better, go and do it, or run, or whatever you need to be. You're lucky Kevin's got a swim and triathlon background. Speak to Dan about running. But there's lots of reasons to get involved in the swim test with students. Make sure you debrief every dive. It just sounds like you're pointing out the obvious, but not just in terms of reviewing the skills that were done, but actually how did the dive go? Remember, we are trying to train divers, and just review how the dive went in terms of the whatever parameters you set out in your dive plan. How was the gas? Did we reach gas before we had expected to? Did everyone keep order in the team as we planned or discussed? Did the equipment operate as anticipated? You know, just take the time to review that dive. Don't brush over it. You know, don't say as well that you think or maybe, you know, try and just keep it. There's enough information on things that you actually saw and observed to pick up on those things. Just try and think about maybe one thing that went well, one thing you keep, one thing that you would want the team to bring forward into the next dive, and maybe one thing that wasn't successful. The key thing with debriefs is, if you're going to give feedback, do it straight away. I mean, we do have the elements of immediacy and primacy that we can deal with. You know, and get them to maybe, where appropriate, debrief each other. That's something you have to be careful with, but it's a great way of seeing how much information the diver, even a new diver, is taking in. How do you think that went? How did that feel? Do you remember how that felt coming up that slope or balancing on the edge of that platform? And that's a great way for you to start to add feedback very naturally into the conversation. But think about the dive, and offer solutions to the team, because that's what we're trying to do at that point. We're debriefing the dive and the structure of the dive, and then we're trying to come away with things which will help all of us. Ask for debrief as well. Now, that may not be straight away, but certainly you'll say to the students, look, well, how were the hand signals? Did I explain that in a way that was useful? Could everybody understand what I was asking for? Ask for kind of ongoing feedback, because you need to make sure you're speaking their language. But make sure you debrief the dive and what the big picture was, what the big picture takeaways from that dive. Don't just brush over it and just list the skills that you did, because there's more to it than that. Debrief every diver as well. You know, this is so important. You know, now that doesn't mean, you know, tear everybody a new backside on every single dive. What this means is, let's think about what are the things I'm trying to do. What are the things that are not like a dive this person is doing? What are the things I need to have them stop doing or change? And I can't give them a list of 50 or 100 things, because their brains will explode. Just give them one thing. It may well be that a diver has a number of problems. It may well be that the buoyancy control is not where it needs to be. You know, their fin movements are erratic and their kicks aren't coordinated, that they're not paying any attention to the team. And oh my God, where do you even start with that list? It's easy. You start at the top of the list and you fix one thing at a time, okay? You just don't try and fix all the problems all in one go, because they won't remember the solutions you're giving them. Just ask them, you know, or sorry, just tell them, I want you to, on this dive, just think about your breathing only. That's all I want you to do, is just concentrate just on your breathing on this dive, and make that the simple objective then. Okay, so that's a simple objective they're going to take into the of problems to fix, because they'll never remember it, and you'll never remember what you asked them to do. But if you've got maybe 4 or 6 or 8 dive sessions with a student, well, actually you start to build then a list of 6 or 8 things which they can fix. That's for a new diver. This is important as well, particularly if you're working with certified assistants and working with video divers, is debrief them as well. Now that's going to be a separate conversation. You know, you might want to bring them to one side and debrief your team and them individually, but tell them, you know, look, that video position really wasn't what I needed, or was what I needed, or you know, I needed you to be more effective in looking after that student while I worked with this other one. But essentially, you know, if they are certified assistants, even if they are already an instructor, you are still there and able to give them feedback and positive feedback as an individual. And if they're a trainee dive master or trainee instructor, it's just a brilliant opportunity to show them how to be more effective when they qualify. So, you know, always remember that they're students as well, and don't be afraid to, you know, prepare them to be good at receiving feedback. All right, and students don't mind you much. They know they're students and they expect to be at the receiving end of feedback. It's sometimes more difficult, and I've been in that situation with instructors who I've been coaching. It worked for me, and that's why I don't think it worked in that situation. And sometimes, you know, you have to take that feedback, and it means you have to sit on your hands, let the emotional wave pass over you, digest the information, and say thank you for the feedback, and absorb it. So debrief every diver, and be prepared to be debriefed. You know, these are useful skills to learn. And finally, last one. This is the 13 of the baker's dozen. This is just into pet peeve territory. Don't make their buddy checks or pre-dive checks. There's so many reasons not to do that. Dive equipment's heavy. Why stand it up for one moment longer than you would need to? I've seen it even recently, actually, with two younger divers, and they were sat down quite comfortably next to each other. And the instructor then made them stand up and face each other to do their buddy check. And it just was completely counterintuitive. They were quite comfortable. They could see each other from where they were sat. Actually, that is much more like what they're going to find on a dive boat. You know, they're not going to be able to stand up in the middle of the deck and go over each other's equipment. Keep them comfortable. You know, we've got thermal stress to think about during the summer, particularly if they're wearing dry suits. It might be you've got younger divers with you, and they're maybe diving with a 10 or dumpy 12 litre. It's really heavy, and just why have them stand there doing it? Be conscientious, be sensitive to them, and have them sit down, be comfortable. Encourage them to think about, if they're going to do their pre-dive checks, do they all need to move around a little bit to sit next to each other like they would on a dive boat? Diving's stressful enough, right? And particularly if you're learning, I just think it's just the worst thing, I think, to see students stood there for no reason in heavy equipment, coming thermally stressed, you know, putting stress on their back, and it's totally unnecessary and doesn't prepare well to be able to do an effective buddy check when they come to be, you know, go down to Plymouth or whatever to be on a dive boat or the Red Sea or wherever it may be. And that will just, you know, keep them happier and more comfortable and more with you. And that's it. That is my that's my rant and rave.
Thanks, James. That was really good. Yeah, I like that last one as well, because it is more representative of what a diver would need to do on a boat, like you say, sitting down. And I think they can't really do checks that efficiently when they're under stress. So, like you say, in the heat, carrying their equipment, that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty good tip. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of these things like that are done habitually.
Yeah.
You know, we you know, it's these closed loops, isn't it? So, you know, we were taught to stand up to do a buddy check. And remember as well, a buddy check shouldn't be teaching your buddy how your equipment works. Right? That's like, it's way too late. You know, it's like, you know, in the event of emergency, you know, pull this, twist that, yank that down, move that, I'll do this. And the other person's dutifully going, yeah, 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 yeah. And it's just going in one ear and out the other. And none of that stuff is ever going to happen in the water. Get them to sit down with each other.
Yeah, under stress, it's going to go in even less, isn't it? So, right, we've got a couple of questions.
Take the questions down.
Yeah. So Bex has got a couple of questions. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask them, Bex, or would you like me to ask them out? Let's have a look. Yeah, I'll ask them out then. So yeah, it's okay. We've got a couple of questions. So any tips for dealing with disengaged students? Any sort of general tips you've got there?
Yeah, I think it is difficult. I think sometimes you need to work out what it is that's turning them off. They're disengaged. It could be through stress. It could be that they're just tired. It could be that they're hungry. It may well be that they've got something else on their mind. It can also happen as well in a resort situation where they simply do not want to be on that class. I've had that happen so many times, where particularly if you have a couple, you know, she's going gangbusters to go and do a PADI open water course, and he really just wants to be sat at the bar. And sometimes you can't win, and it is the nuclear option sometimes. But you have to say to someone, "Why are you here? Really, why are you here? This is your time and money, and it's my time." You know, that might be the case. It might well be that they just missed breakfast, and you just need to fire a banana at them. And I always used to keep, as often as I can remember, to just a bunch of bananas and some, you know, granola type bars in the back of the car. And especially with the younger person, they skip breakfast, throw something to eat at them, and like within 10 minutes they're back in the game with you. Yeah, there's lots of different reasons for stress, and almost not being engaged. Almost none of them are to do with you as an individual. So you need to work. You need to communicate and find out where their brain's pointing. You know, where their head is at.
Yeah, so it's about getting to the root of that stress.
Hey, look, yeah, it is. It is. And there is no point in just plowing on regardless with that person. Knowing to stop with them. Sometimes it might just be something simple like, you know, they do just need a sugar fix and a brew, and just go and get it for them. You know, so it's
answers. Another one from Bex was, did you record your students in water for all courses, regardless of the agency you were teaching for?
No, I didn't. I just basically wasn't really equipped to do it. Now, the question is, would I, with a little bit of training on how to do it? Yeah, it would have made it so much easier. I mean, particularly when doing very large IDCs. So if you've seen the PADI course director slates, you know, the great big monster ones, that's how they used to be, you know, you'd end up with 6 instructor candidates, and they'd have 4 skills each and 2 problems per skill. That's a huge amount of information to collect, and you'd be essentially reliant on making notes in water while it was happening. And video would have made that so much more effective. You know, I would explore and ensure you're within the standards of the agency that you're working with. But essentially, even if I was working on my own now, I would still just have a camera there. I can shoot something, I can clip it away, and it's done again. So in hindsight, I wish I would have, because I think there's loads of occasions where it would have been a good use of time. What you actually find is that there's a certain point where there's a law of diminishing returns with video as well. It gets to the point where, particularly near the end of complex classes, there isn't a great deal to gain from video, because the diver generally has a very good awareness of where their feet are or where they are positioning wise, and they've kind of, they're already mentally seeing themselves on video that you haven't shot, so they've already done that to themselves, and they've already externalized that view of themselves. So there's lots, so that you do get a bit of a diminishing return with it. But use it judiciously. But if you haven't got a camera there with you, you can't do it at all. And just practice with each other. Do you know what I mean? And it's a fun way to interact if you've got no students in the water or in the pool that night. Float in the pool, put an SMB up, video it, and have a practice of saying, okay, that was nice, that's good. Did you see you did that? That was good. But don't just go, oh, that was really nice, or that was great, and move on. Why was it great? Now, what was good about it? Why did it work? So it's not just picking up things that we want to change. It's identifying the things we want to keep. What did it look like? Why did it look like that? And you should always be able to find room for improvement. If you go, oh, you did that, and that was perfect, and there is no circumstance that you could in any way make that better, then that basically means you are at the same level as your student, and that isn't acceptable. You should be able to at any point offer valuable feedback to a diver. Otherwise, that diver should be teaching you. There should be, I can't imagine any circumstance when someone did something that did not have a space for improvement, positive, useful improvement as well. And that should be reflected in your own diving skills.
I think that was my favourite tip of the presentation, the video one. I film quite a lot of stuff. You can even film yourself when you're working out to look at your form and all that kind of stuff. It always really helps to have that other point of view, doesn't it? And yeah, go on.
I mean, there's lots of studies done in terms of the way the human brain recognizes itself on projected, and we're very good at seeing it and observing ourselves. We can actually, the video suits that they use for the motion capture, so where they have the dots on them. So I actually took a number of people and had them work moving against a dark background, so it was only the dots that were visible. People can pick themselves out just by the movement of the dots. We're very, very good at being able to do it. So we can relate to it very, very easily.
Yeah, I like that video tip.
Our brain's quite good at working out what we're doing, particularly with new divers, particularly with things like foot positioning, and the tunnel of vision, and the brain is pointing forward and looking at you. It's not thinking about where the feet of chaos are. So it's really good for giving them that rear view mirror.
Yeah, definitely is. Got a few more questions. Duncan, do you want to ask your question, or is it unmute and ask?
Yeah.
Hey Dan, you all right, Dan?
All right. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you'd ever failed a student, and sort of with that, or if you had a student who wasn't at the standard, how would you deal with that? Like, would you give them extra lessons? Would you charge more? Would you give them like visual passes and stuff? It seems like a difficult thing for people to do. It doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah, it's really difficult. So if I understand your question, have I and how do you fail a student? I've got a really kind of core belief that at the entry level, it's instructor failure. If you're teaching an entry level class and you can't deliver, the student hasn't done anything wrong, because they have nothing to do wrong. They have simply, that means if they're not prepared, it's because you haven't prepared them. If their kit doesn't work, it's because you haven't ensured their kit was right. If they don't have time to complete the skill, it's because you didn't create space for them to complete that. So at the entry level, the emphasis, I think, is on instructor. And the way you deal with that is just good pre-class prep. And I think this is something which Ollie talked about in his presentation. Speak to the student. Just have a chat with them. Every student you should have a phone call with. How are you? What's going on? What do you want? What do you use? What do you like? What don't you? And you can build a picture very, very, very quickly of someone. Now, it may well be that someone has just not given you a complete picture, and they turn up, and what they are giving you is not what they said was going to happen. And that is a very rare occasion. I've not had it happen personally, but I have had instructor colleagues just get to the end of dive 1. And this is interesting. At that point, even still, you can say to them, look, you are not going to move past the end of this class in a way which is going to meet the past performance requirements. But you've got me for 4 days, right? What do you want to work on? Because it's clear that they have something to work on. If their buoyancy is just so shocking, this is maybe more for high level classes. If they've just turned up and their buoyancy is just terrible, and you go, there is no way you're going to do Decode 40 as an example. They've just spun you a line about how good they were. You say to them, right, your buoyancy sucks and you won't meet the requirements of this class, but I tell you what, let's just go back to first principles. If you're willing to give me those 4 days, you've already paid for them, just accept and put the certification to one side. Let's spend 4 days just working on buoyancy. It's very rare that they would turn that down. You have to understand that not every diver can be better that takes them past the point of certification. But every diver can improve. And you should always be able to give improvements for every diver. Pre-screening will help. And just having like a really good toolkit that if you just think, man, this is just falling to bits on dive 1, you go, right. Sometimes you have to split the class. There are sometimes logistical barriers to doing that. Sometimes you just have to go back to first principles with someone. It's more often the instructor has just done an appalling job of pre-screening and qualifying the student expectation properly. And that's instructor failure. That's not student failure.
Cool. We got probably time for another couple. Robert, do you want to unmute and ask your one?
Hi, James. Thanks for that. Good to hear the benefit of your experience. I had a question for you about feedback. How do you formulate your feedback? Do you do the feedback sandwich of good, bad, and good? Is that the standard?
Sandwich, I think you'll be
sandwich. If you've got multiple issues, do you just sort of focus on the key ones, or would you go through all of them?
Really good question. So in formulating feedback, you know, how do we work out what we've got to fix? Yeah, it's really you've got to be good at triage. You've got to try and work out what doesn't look diver-like here. What is the thing which is the problem? Some of that's just going to come with experience. I would say that with almost no exception, your problems are going to come when you're looking at a diver who's having problems. You think about, right, what do I start feeding back on here? Is it something really basic? Is it I need to make some changes in their equipment? Let's have a look at that. Is it their head position? Okay, maybe it's a bit of that. Is it where their knees are? Yeah, it's a bit of that. Is it how they're rotating their ankles on the kick? There's a bit of that. Right, Christ, there's a list of things there. Which one do I fix first? Right, equipment. Let's get the harness fitted, because there's no point in trying to fix their feet if the harness is bunching their back up. So, you know, sometimes you'll get a bit of an order of triage with them. The other thing I would do as well is I would try and be honest with the student and say, look, it might be there's a couple of different things going on here. I'm going to try and fix the thing which I think is most important, and I might be wrong, but let's try that first, and let's see whether that. And you just got to start ticking them off the list and just say, I may or may not. You know, sometimes you just hit gold straight away. Sometimes it is an extra inch on their harness. Sometimes it is changing the fins for a different make of fin. What's very, very useful to do in terms of formulating the feedback, and this is actually something I got working as a staff instructor, trying to absorb a lot of information for debriefs on the fly, generally on the boat back, is build the narrative in your head. And this sounds so stupid. So for example, something's happening and maybe you've got two divers doing a gas share or something. Okay, so Benjamin's head is dropping forward. Okay, Simon's knees are down a little bit. I'm not just observing that. What I'm actually doing, I'm saying the debrief, and you'd be surprised it sticks. So actually narrate the debrief in your head. You sound like, so use that additional voice in your head. And then his head dropped forward and he grabbed the hose the wrong way. And then what you can do then is combine that with giving yourself, so I'd be holding the camera. So I do something like I'd reach into the camera and just point at the head and go distance or up a little bit. So I give myself a prompt, you know, reach in front of your wide angle lens and do that. But use that voice and kind of say what you would say to them if they were listening to you. And there's something I found just that doing a lap in my brain stuck with the debrief. So I'd build the narrative of the debrief as I was going along in the dive. What that requires, and kind of as a last point on that, it does require you to have the capacity to do that, because you'll be managing the skill, the diver, the dive, your assistants, building the debrief, thinking about the next skill and giving feedback. And you might need to be doing that upside down in a dry suit in a horrible position. So you've got to be on it. Yeah, and it's all about having your capacity. If your skills as a diver are just where they need to be, then you'll find teaching entry-level classes particularly really easy and very, very stress-free, because they're essentially doing the simplest dive you can imagine. So you'll have the capacity to build narratives and debriefs and operate cameras and give feedback and so on. I hope that answered your question.
Cool. Kev, do you want to go for your one?
Yeah, hi mate, can you hear me?
All good.
Yeah, can you hear me, James? Yeah.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I got you.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, my question has it's evolved a little bit. You're answering stuff on the way anyway. Can you talk to us on how important it is to stick to that dive plan, whether it's in teaching? Only because I've been DMing for instructors lately. Pre-COVID, and for instance, we go in and we do dive number 1 with a brand new student, but because the student was doing well, the instructor decided to do a little bit more, and it really did make a mess of it and almost kick the confidence a little bit, because it wasn't briefed before the dive. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah. Okay. So dropping things which are unbriefed.
Yeah.
Because you can get away with it sometimes. I would say that kind of some of that it comes back to know when to quit.
Yeah.
I would say that it would be highly unusual that if you got to the point in a dive where everything had been done, where there was no room for further improvement on anything that had been performed in that dive, that you just go like throw something into the mix. And I think that's an uncommon occurrence. It might well be that we found when we were working together that simply just repeating a skill again and doing it even slower would help. So that's not adding anything new in, it's adding a variable like time component into it, forcing the slowing down of the skill from the students. And that you've got to work out like what is actually useful time in the water. What is giving them the most improvement, and often focusing on the slowest, simplest elements of the dive will give them the most benefit as a diver. Not like throwing in like some crazy gas drill or I don't know, all these complex things. They're really just instructor ego tools. They're not really about student learning. If you know, sticking to the dive plan, yeah, sure, you know, if you said your minimum gas is 60 bar or maximum time in the water is an hour, yeah, they're parameters, sure, that we want to stick to. We have a max depth of 21 meters, but yeah, they're hard parameters. But we should have the skill and the capacity as an instructor to think, actually, we've moved through that. That's all looking pretty good, but I think we can do that a little better. So you can just set it up, run the skill again. What's quite useful, and something of an adjunctive point to that, is building a vocabulary with the student. So when I was saying, let's do that again, let's move up and down a little bit. Now, as I'm giving the debriefs, what I can start doing is start adding my language into it. So what I'm going to be doing when we're talking about trim is, what I want to do is dump a little bit of gas out from here and think about equalizing. So when you do that in the water, they know what you mean. So if you want them to change something about a little bit, you've got more of a vocabulary with them. You know, if you want them just to slow it down, do it again, and show me going this way, because you've already built that vocabulary with them, it's much easier then to start working around skills you've already covered with them without adding tons of crazy new stuff in there. Because generally that's just the instructor just showing off how much he knows.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that, mate. We got one more, Dan.
There's no more in the chat, so if anyone wants to unmute and ask a quick question, feel free. No. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there then. So thanks for that, James. I really appreciated a lot of the stuff in that talk. I agree with what Andrew said in the chat. A lot of it was really useful for us as certified assistants as well, working our way up through the AI and the instructor courses. Some really good stuff that we can focus on and learn, especially that video one. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and definitely these things, you know, even if you are the student on a class, look for these things, look for your instructor doing it, and, you know, hold them to account.
That's it. It's not just applicable to instructors.
It's a good tally of whether they're on the game or not.
Yeah, definitely. That's it. Not just applicable to instructors. This is something that everyone should look out for. So that's really good and really useful. Thanks. So thanks everyone for coming. Next week, same time next week, 7 o'clock, we've got Jill Heinarth speaking about operational safety and expedition diving. So Jill's an explorer, a writer, and a photographer, a speaker and a filmmaker. She's a technical diver. She's been on a lot of different expeditions and projects. That's going to be a really good one, talking about the safety aspect of expeditions. So sign up on Facebook, on the 7Tech Facebook page, and we'll see you there next week. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, James. See you soon.